Okay. For the water unit, we switched from AP Classroom to Neo for the free response questions so that we could use questions where students couldn't search the answers. And it made a very interesting um, difference. I was really encouraged to see a lot of kids who've really been studying continue to do really well. Um, because the questions on Neo are maybe more direct, um, the course has been perfectly aligned to those questions. Um, a lot of students did really, really well. And it shows there might be one topic that you didn't study or you misunderstood, a couple of questions where maybe you were rushed, but it doesn't take a whole lot to do well enough on the free response questions because those are doubled. If you get half of them right, but then that doubles, you don't have to do great on the multiple choice to already be like in the C range. Um, so there's a bunch of students who I could tell really been studying, really been taking the tests honestly. If you read the book and then you do your homework and you watch the lectures, there's some kids who you can tell they're just like blah 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 blah. They just bang it out, boom, and that's wonderful to see. I'm really grateful to all the students who have really been using the class constructively. Also, I think everybody's used to the format by now, and that's very encouraging. Breaking up your answers, using full sentences. When it asks for two things, you give two things. Um, that was really nice too. It was sort of discouraging. It's obvious also that some kids haven't been doing the homework, haven't been reading the book, haven't been watching the lectures. Um, and so I don't know. I guess we always know that happens. I do think in COVID there might be a bit more of that. I think a lot of kids are just burned out or not mentally really excited about life, and so it's harder to do well in school. Um, I understand and I sympathize. Um, but for anybody who wants to, it's super doable. The questions are very direct. I make sure that they're all aligned with the content of the course before I make the exams. Um, and for anybody who wants to, you can still do corrections. In this case, they'll be due by Friday of this week. Um, and so let's go over the content of the exam. Um, the stuff in the multiple choice was mostly really solid. Um, Everybody got one wrong here, one wrong there, but there weren't a lot of questions where students did a big nosedive. One question that seemed to trip up almost half the class, which is significant, was the idea that logging makes stream temperatures higher. And I guess that's a connection between two concepts that maybe you didn't make. But logging increases erosion, so dirt falls off the mountain. And then remember that sediment pollution in water makes the water hotter. So that's why logging increases stream temperatures. Um, let's see. That turbidity is the word for that, for stuff suspended in water. I think that only came up a couple times last unit, so I can see how you'd forget. Um, I was a little surprised that students didn't realize there's more fresh water in ice and glaciers than any other reservoir. That was a pretty easy to remember study goal at the beginning, and that got about a third of the class. That's surprising. Um, One of the main sources of cultural eutrophication is nitrates from agriculture. I remember nitrates is how we fertilize our fields. That tripped up almost half the class. That was surprising. And ozone is used as a disinfectant for water. Remember that ozone is harmful to life, and so that's why you can use it as a sterilizer for water. I think that came up in wastewater treatment. The idea that urbanization reduces groundwater recharge, that was pretty direct. I mean, that was in the class a number of times, but that got about a third of the class. More than half the class, this was a surprising one, didn't know that embankment is channelization. And remember that there's no filter to hold sediment. So canals cause massive sediment dumping down river of the canals, of the channelized section. Otherwise, I think everybody pretty much nailed it. Like there's one or two people that got any single question wrong, but nothing else that really stood out. In the free response, I won't be releasing the key, but you do have all this stuff in your notes. The impacts of how channelization encourages coliform bacteria. Remember that coliform bacteria is anaerobic. And so more nutrients in the water can make coliform bacteria do better. Less dissolved oxygen is a really big deal because coliform bacteria is anaerobic. So you would have more dissolved oxygen because the water's hotter in a canal, and because the water is less disturbed on the surface. Oops, excuse me. The organic pollution and sediment in canals is a main feeder for coliform bacteria. And of course, urban runoff has a lot of poop already in it. So canals tend to be filled with coliform bacteria due to the runoff that goes into canals because they're associated with high concentrations of humans. The dam question I thought was pretty direct. You had a study goal where we talked about the impacts uphill and downhill. You just had to find the ones that would impact a farmer. And I think here a lot of kids just didn't have enough detail. So there's a lot of kids that would say something that could be right if you explained it, but without an explanation, it could also be wrong. But you know, the risk of damage, the net loss of water volume, the change in timing of water flow, less sediment in the delivered water, salinization of delivered water, those are pretty obvious. Some of the more remote stuff, some farmers do use wetlands for farming, and a lot of kids mentioned wetlands, but they didn't connect it to the farming styles. Nobody mentioned the international conflicts. Nobody mentioned the pollution from recreational use of farms, of reservoirs. But anyway, kids did a little bit better, not horribly. C was pretty mellow. Wetlands filter water, they increase groundwater recharge. Those are pretty easy. Sometimes kids came up with stuff that was not directly tied to a water supply. Municipal water supply is how you give water to a city. And I think a lot of kids talked about benefits of wetlands that just weren't specific to water supply. Make sure that you read the question, that you answer it directly. The dissolved oxygen one was kind of all or nothing. Some kids just made stuff up because they didn't listen to that lecture. And for kids who took notes and saw that lecture, it was pretty straightforward. It was a 3-point answer, and most kids either did it or didn't. There wasn't a lot of in between on that. And E, about desalination, was almost across the board perfect. Everybody knows that desalination is very expensive because it takes a lot of energy. Your corrections are due by Friday of this week. The assignment should be open by today or tomorrow to turn in those corrections. Remember to explain how you know your new answer is correct, and make sure that you say what the wrong thing was that you're fixing. Okay, that's it for the Unit 7 video, Unit 7 exam review video. Thanks, I'll see you around.